Welcome back to Walk with TAB. Tim Bryson here, and as y'all know, I'm a Black millennial who is eager to have unfiltered conversation with authentic people centered on international education, global sport, and Black culture. Today, we are walking with a talent agent, former Division I athlete, and of course, a friend. Born and raised in New Zealand, this guy has over 10 years of experience, front office experience in the United States, including a detailed background in sport, business, and law, talent ID and development, revenue generation, commercial partnerships, and strategic development. His athlete experience, career decisions, and visionary leadership prepared him to be the founder and CEO of Hawker Family Sports and Entertainment, which we'll discuss on this show. And just a couple years later, he transitioned to his current role at Halo Sport as a professional sports agent. As I was thinking about guests to open up season 5 with, man, this guy was a no-brainer for a number of different reasons, right? Recently listening to a podcast, he talked about networking and how he hates that term, and he's more so used the term friendships, and I see him laughing now. And this guy is definitely a friend. Is going to kick off this season in a way that I'm going to be beneficial for not just myself, but for everyone listening to this episode or watching on YouTube. So without further ado, y'all help me welcome my Kiwi friend, Tay Hawker. What's poppin', Tay?
How you doing, man? I feel like I need to take you around with me. That's a hell of an introduction, and I'm happy that I'm able to notch up all those things, but I'm just another guy. It's been a fun last decade and a bit, I suppose, in sport. But thank you very much. I've actually had this circled on my calendar for a while. Very excited to be here.
Hey, look, I'm glad you reached out because I was like, I need to get on this man's calendar. One, because I know the World Cup's happening down under, no pun intended. But then two, you're a busy guy, bro. You're a busy guy. And so I was telling you, we do make it work. So I was telling you before, right? 3 segments, right? As you know, listen to this podcast before. Segment 1 will focus on your story on purpose. Segment 2 is going to focus on global sport. And again, we have a lot to talk about. And then our last segment will, of course, talk about how we can best support you in your role as you continue to walk throughout your purpose journey. But segment 1, and Tay, again, I know at least a little bit more about you. I listened to that last episode on that podcast. But Tay Hawker, man, what's your story?
Yeah, it's been a bit of an unorthodox one, but born and raised in New Zealand, moved over to the States to St. Louis, Missouri when I was 18. Got my college degree at Lindenwood University in sports management with a minor in marketing and political science. Did a bit of work for the Rams while they were in St. Louis, which ages me a lot now. It feels like years ago they were in St. Louis. And then moved out to Los Angeles, joined with the Clippers for my OPT. I was on the visa journey. Ended up having to go back to school to stay on my F1 to continue my American dream, and went back and fortunately was able to go to the best school in the country and the best program in the country, but went to Arizona State, got my master's in sports law and business, which I'm really proud, as you can tell, proud alumni. I'm still on the board for that program, and then carried on to become Director of Student Athlete Development over at Old Dominion University before NIL popped up. So transition over to running, as you mentioned, my agency, Hawker Family Sports and Entertainment. And then, yeah, really excitingly was taken in by Halo, which I'm working at now. And Halo is part of a very large sports agency network, doing a bit in. We've got a pretty big footprint in the brand space across MKTG, which is the American-facing name of the company, but we're on the talent side. Halo's the talent arm of MKTG, so to speak. So we're the largest rugby agency in the world, but also have a handful of individual sports. I'm obviously a football agent, and yeah, wicked time to be back in New Zealand with the World Cup, but nature of sports, I'm in New Zealand now, but I don't know where I'll be tomorrow. So yeah, no, it's been an awesome journey.
I love it, bro. And I appreciate the introduction, but I'm going to take us back a little bit, right? Because I did a lot of practice trying to make sure I got this name right. And if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is Whanganui Collegiate School?
Very close, Whanganui.
Whanganui. Tell us more about that experience, right? Because I think as we talk about global sport, I think a lot of the focus in global sport, goes to the academies, goes to professional athletics in particular, but K-12 education and whatever K-12 is called or looks like, one's respective context, it's definitely, some formative years. So what was your experience like at that school?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. My dad's job took us to Indonesia for the first few years of my life. So I was raised in Jakarta for the first few years and then moved back to Whanganui when I was about six or seven. So, Jesus, I should be able to feels like years ago. Well, it was years ago. And so I moved to Wanganui when I was quite young and started school there. Well, I started school in Jakarta actually at an international school, and then went to St. George's was the first school, and then we're a part of our curriculum was very British based. We were on the IB system, and so yeah, my school was followed pretty close to the British style of education, and so it was in a small town. Wanganui was a tiny town at the bottom of the North Island in New Zealand, and yeah, it was cool, man. I suppose if it wasn't for the internet, I wouldn't have had the dreams and aspirations of going to
Mm,
America and taking me out of that. So I think the tie between, and which I'm sure we'll get to, but the tie between technology, the internet, and
hmm
globalization is just
hmm
on steroids. And so this was 20 years, not 20, sorry, 10, 11, 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
You know, YouTube was just coming up. When I went to my university, I'd seen pictures, but there wasn't an Instagram account. There wasn't ways for me to
Wow.
see the resource over there. It was all just, there was a YouTube, I remember, that did like one of those bird's eye flyovers of the
hmm
university. And I was like, oh,
hmm
well, it exists. But yeah, back then there was very little information, but I was tied into, I was enjoying, you know, American music, American sports. We got ESPN, so I was able to see some of that. So even from a small town in Wanganui, it was, I was able to go see the world, so to speak, through, you know, being able to be inspired by those sorts of things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing I've been more mindful of, right, is that I grew up, I'm a US native, right, and a US citizen. So I don't know anything different, right, than not having ESPN here and the da-da-da, you know, every night. And so as you were like watching this through tech growing up, right, you came to the US to go to school, which again, it'll come up in conversation. And now going back to New Zealand, how have you described like sport in America, coming back to, you know, talking with your friends in Australia, New Zealand, but also other places around the world?
Yeah, incredible question, because it's been me coming back after 10 years away has been it's been the most difficult, frankly, transition. They call it reverse culture shock. I'm a foreigner in my own country. I'm very American, and with that comes the cultural change of sports in the States. And I think New Zealand culture around sport isn't the greatest. We hold our athletes to the highest of standards, and we're very judgy when it comes to uh, people putting themselves out there. We don't love putting our athletes on a pedestal, and and that's, we call it tall poppy syndrome. It's this thing where when people grow too big for their britches, so to speak, we like to bring them back down and remind them that they're just one of us, and that's fine on the surface. But when it comes to sport, some of our athletes are the best in the world at their positions or their sport. We've got the number one, well, I don't know where we're ranked right now, but historically the most winningest team in sports is the New Zealand national rugby team. And so our culture is just not quite there. With that being said, the atmosphere at the women's soccer games have been incredible. We've packed out stadiums. It's been wicked. So it might be a rugby thing, and we just haven't had an emphasis in other sports. I don't know. But to how do I explain it to answer your question? American sports is surreal, man. It's the surreal is the best word to explain it. I've been on the sideline of a lot of NFL, college football games, college basketball games, and you just look around and you just go, wow, the cheering and getting into it, the dressing up, the passion, the excitement. There's very few things that I remember year and year how many times I've got up at 6 a.m. to start drinking with my friends to tailgate on a Saturday morning. Like, who does that? And it's the best thing ever. And so, yeah, I could be here all day. It's the pure excitement, the effort that is put into game presentation is bar none. And so, yeah, it's been a hard transition coming back into a slightly different culture. There's pros and cons to both. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, it's been a tough transition. I'll tell you that.
No, I can believe it, bro. And as you think about, right, you just mentioned there's pros and cons to both. I think it's funny. I'm sure that coffee in your cup.
Mhm.
Oh, cheers. I'm drinking a beer. So shout out to the time zone
Oh,
difference.
I would have happily gone beer with you. I was just telling you we started pre-game at 6.
Happy hour times over here. But what are some of the, you said the pros and cons in both. So what is something in the New Zealand context, I think, that you believe American sport culture could take away and or learn from to better apply here in the US?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we do down here in our ability to stay centered to the fan from a player's perspective is really special. And I think
Mm,
that uh, our governing bodies and everything don't do a great job for the fan, but our players are always stopping to sign the extra autograph, and will be there to give the fan
good.
a hug or the little kid a high five, and those sorts of things that it certainly happens in the States. Do not get me wrong, but LeBron James is a lot more untouchable than a first five on the All Black rugby team.
Sure.
That's someone that you could probably get a hold of if you needed to. And I think that's quite special because I think
Yeah.
it enables our younger people to see it a lot more visually as a plausible thing they can achieve. And
Hmm.
like if you're a young basketball player in the States, you want to make the NBA. But I think there's got to be an element in you that's like, I probably am not going to be LeBron James or Michael Jordan. There's got to
Hmm.
be that. Whereas, or if you're like, oh, I would love to ask LeBron a question, there's layers of management and
Yep.
security and everything else before you
Yep.
can reach out to them. Whereas our players are a lot more touchable and you can actually get to them. So I think that's quite cool. It enables the youth to kind of see it's very like you probably are at the same high school as a lot of All Blacks have gone to just because we're a smaller country. And so
Hmm.
you're like, oh, well, if he's done it, I can do it. We're the same upbringing. So
Uh,
that sort of stuff is a very common story here, which I think is quite cool.
you mentioned rugby a few times, including the All Black team.
Yeah.
Again, I'm from the US. I grew up here. Rugby was like this thing that people that were like just crazy played. It's like, why would you hit each other with no equipment? Even though I know it's safer. Put that caveat, I do know it's safer. But like, talk about rugby culture, especially growing up. 'Cause in that podcast, I think with platform, you mentioned that from the time you could hold a rugby ball, you were playing rugby. So what's the rugby culture like? Describing it as to particularly our American,
Yeah.
audiences who be tuning in.
Yeah. I think to touch on as soon as you hold a rugby ball, you're probably playing rugby. It'll be like combining hockey, baseball, basketball, football, and when it comes to the nature of the American passion and then
Mm,
putting it into one sport. Like we really don't have that many other options as far as a big sport goes. And so your weekends are rugby, your
wow.
weekdays are training for rugby, your like
Dang.
it's just it's
Dang.
kind of like the main thing that we do. That's certainly under attack right now. Our
Mm,
participation is way down at the youth level, like staggeringly low,
wow.
because it is dangerous. It's not any more or less. For the Americans, I say it's closer to wrestling than football.
Okay.
The tackle is like a double leg takedown, and so it's close. Like when we talk about it being safer, I think it's closer to wrestling than American football. But yeah, it's just one of those things that it is the nature of our country. In Wanganui, we don't have like nightclubs or anything. And so Saturday nights are at the local rugby clubs. And so you go to the rugby club that's like there's a bar there and just like it's like a tavern, so to speak.
Yeah.
But that's our social life. And so not it's so intertwined with our culture that it becomes second nature.
Mm, that's good. So before we transition to segment two, again, right, this life as an agent, experience as an agent, something you never wanted to do, right? Never thought to even consider, growing up, if you will.
Yeah.
At what point did you say, you know what, this might be a lane? I know, again, you pivoted and made decisions along the way, but at what point were you like, this might be a little thing I might dabble in?
Yeah. I think I didn't want to be an agent because I saw myself. So you can talk about whys and passions and everything, and I have always wanted to help an athlete make the most out of their opportunity as an athlete throughout their
Hmm.
life.
Yep.
I hung up my boots. I don't get to play anymore. The cleats are done,
Hmm.
and that I recognize that was such a small part of my life that I have a lot of regrets. I wish I had gone out for the extra run. I wish I had lifted that extra weight. I wish I'd
Yes.
recovered better. And I think I look back on that now and I go, it'd be really cool to help athletes leverage that time in their career for the rest of their life. And originally, I wanted to do that in college athletics, which is a sore topic now based on where we're at in college athletics. But the the for me, my why was helping athletes to create a life for themselves. That's what it boils down to. So I love it. I really enjoy the personalities, and it's sport. We all love sport. That's why we're here. So I guess from my point of view, when I was in college athletics, I was found to be, we weren't, I suppose the best way to say it is, as an agent, I get to be more involved than just in student athlete development. And
Hmm.
whether it be negotiating their salaries or their opening up sponsorships and endorsements, or helping them with social media, or introducing them to a real estate agent. You basically get to become this support arm, which I'm really proud to be, for athletes. And it's exciting. You get to watch them in all their victories, and you get to be their rock when they struggle. And yeah, it's been awesome. I think I would say the two, from college athletics going to pro, you just get a bit more freedom to help in more different ways, I guess is the best way to explain it.
Super dope segment too, man. Again, talking about global sport at a high level, because again, as someone who's lived in multiple countries and continents for that matter, as well as working with athletes across the world right now, your perspective is invaluable, and definitely but will also add a lot of value to this podcast, and this conversation. So I want to start with the World Cup, right? The Women's World Cup, of course, is happening right now across Australia and New Zealand. And so for those who are tuning in, they kind of have an idea, right? For those who aren't tuning in, if you hear my voice, you need to tune in, at least to the semis and the final that are coming up. But what has it been like, right? As your country is one of the host countries to host, one of the world's largest mega events in the world.
Yeah, it's special. I feel like Chicken Little in that I've been yelling the sky's falling or the World Cup's coming for
Yeah,
months, and now
yeah.
it's here, and I'm like, told you. And so it's been really cool. I think what's been special, so I represent a number of the girls who have played in the World Cup, and obviously have that relationship with them where you get to see them as regular people. But you get to see the look on their face after beating Norway in round one. That was a David versus Goliath sort of game, and seeing that level of excitement in my clients is just, it's why I do it. It's priceless. So
Yeah.
but at the same time, what I thought was kind of on a more macro level, what was really special was, I was talking to an owner of one of the NWSL teams, was at the game with me for the New Zealand Norway game, and we were talking about how special it is that, arguably for the first time, young female footballers in New Zealand could sit in the stands in a packed out stadium, and we're talking packed out to the gills, and they could sit there and watch girls that look like them, from the same backgrounds as them, with the same resources as them, go out there and beat one of the world's best football teams on right in front of their eyes. And now they get to go home. It gives me chills talking about it. They get to go home now and pick up a soccer ball and go, I can do it. And they have that motivation. Whereas historically, the product on the field hasn't looked like them. They haven't had that representation. And so that's always hard to see themselves being able to achieve that. And now they know it's possible. It's been physically right in front of them. So I think while New Zealand has been knocked out and Matildas, Australia's still going, which is great, but there is a lot of young kids here that get to see that it's possible, and that representation is right in front of them now. So I think while it's cool to have all these people on our shore and show off the country, that's great. I think
Yeah.
what's going to happen for women's sports people in the future is more powerful.
No, I agree. I want to stay there for a second because I know you represent, as you mentioned, a lot of women's footballers, soccer athletes, footballers.
Soccer. Sorry, yeah, I'm gonna be switching.
I can switch too. It's all good. But as you talk about, right, women's sports, and we talked about this a little bit before our conversation as well, right? Being able to represent women's athletes, but also seeing the potential growth, I think, exponential growth in women's sport, in your country in particular. Like, where do you see women's sports, situated right now currently in New Zealand? And again, as we talked about before, from a U.S. perspective, again, given that you've been here, I work with women's sports athletes who are still currently playing in the U.S. sport leagues. Again, where have you seen differences and similarities, but then also, like, what's so unique about the New Zealand context that I think more people need to hear and learn about?
Yeah, I think we're really fortunate as a country that we are very progressive in nature, and we're pretty accepting for the most part. There's asterisks to everything. We're pretty
Of course.
accepting
Yeah.
to that level of change, and so we were lucky because the New Zealand women's rugby team, the Black Ferns, won a World Cup in October of last year. Sorry, November of last year, and so they were able to kind of start that conversation down here around the ability, because the World Cup was at home as well, around the power of women's sport, for lack of a better term. And so we were also the first country to let women vote. We were one of the first countries to let LGBTQ plus people get married.
Wow.
And so we've been historically very progressive. And so and not to just sum up women's sport as a progressive thing, because it's a bit, it's more than just a
Mm-hmm.
progressive talking point.
No, for
But
sure.
it's been something that we've certainly got behind. I think in the States, there's a it's just a big country. And so while there's going to be a big group of people that support, there's going to be a big group of people that don't. And it's purely because there's 360 something million in the country. The nature is the unfortunate nature is sometimes the people that don't support can be very loud, and that loudness can eat away at the supporters. And so it just creates this interesting narrative. And I think we've been a little bit more accepting here than I've seen in the States towards
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that also comes with narrative control. And I don't think there's anything wrong in saying that is you, we, I don't think we've done a very good job in the women's sports space of actually being inclusive. And what I mean by that is not making people feel bad or lesser than for not supporting, and creating a environment that's welcoming to those that are like on the fence. Like maybe they've made jokes in the past about women's sport, and now they're going to a game because their partner wants to go to a game, and they go, all right, I'll go. And then they might
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it a little bit, but then they go home and say something to someone, and they'll be like, well, you were just making jokes about it, you can't support us now. It's that sort of exclusionary
Mm-hmm.
language that it's like, you just had them, they were right on the fence, grab them, say, oh, thanks
Mm-hmm.
for coming, I'm glad you had a good time. That sort of, I think that's a really powerful way to get people onto your side, is not making them feel bad because they didn't get on board right away. I always say it's an open bandwagon and we're all taking tickets. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I just think it's one of those things in the States that I would love to see, an encouragement that, especially with soccer, because there's two genders that are excelling in the men's and women's space.
Mm-hmm.
y- there isn't I've never seen a bandwidth on how much sport I can enjoy. It's not like I have to give up one of my passions to now follow women's soccer. You can do both. You can be a huge fan of the men's game and a huge fan of the women's game. And so I've definitely never got to a point where I'm like, damn, I'm just watching too much sport, I've got to drop something off. I love it all. And so yeah, I think it's just one of those things that we have to be more welcoming to those that are on the fence, and not make them feel bad because they weren't a day one. This isn't a exclusionary group. You're all welcome to come support.
It's a great point. That's a really good point. And I want to hone in on your role currently as a talent agent, I believe is the correct term, with Halo, right? And I think, watching the previous podcast, also previous conversations, but in particular, the quote that I took from that platform conversation, right, was, I'm glad to be out of the college sport industry, the US college sport industry, as deep as I was in it. And I'll bring that up for a number of different reasons. One, because I feel very similar, right, being out of the industry now.
Yeah.
But then two, given your role as a talent agent, right, as you mentioned before, you're able to be more hands-on, right? You're able to still do this athlete development work, just in a different context that I think is more clear, right? That's very well understood in regards to what the rules are and aren't. And especially in this US sport model right now, who knows what the hell is going to happen in the next 12, let alone 24 months. So I want to talk,
Yeah.
one, about your role as a talent agent with Halo, but then two, as you think about your time in college sport, again, like where, if anything, what, if anything, do you miss? But also, what did you learn from the U.S. sports system that's prepared you to be a phenomenal talent agent with Halo currently?
Well, I appreciate the phenomenal adjective. We're all trying to get better. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of similarities and differences, as I said, and even in the agency world between New Zealand and America, it's a little bit different. Different sports. There's a lot of those sorts of nuanced differences. I suppose it was a long-winded question. So, which part of do you want me to touch on first? The college athletics piece?
Let's talk on your current role first, right? I think that's
Okay,
one
cool.
super important, and then we can come back to college sport given it's
Cool.
bullshit right
Yeah,
now.
because I need to be careful on. We've got a limited time, and I could be here for 2 hours with a monologue on college
Yeah.
athletics. But yeah, so my current role at Halo, so there's a few different hats that I wear, so to speak. So I work pretty closely in our client welfare development space, so working in the social media presence of our clients, helping them. I'm building out, finalizing our masterclass, which is going to be a 12-month program where our athletes are able to learn who they are as people and who they are as a commercial entity, and talking about all their, I won't give away too much, but I'm hoping my competitors listen. But things like developing what their strategy, their social strategy is going to be, and something that really aligns to them, how to handle the media, how to stick out, so to speak. So we build all that sort of stuff. I help with a bit of back end data management as an agency, and a bit on the legal side as well. But then, a big point for me is as a football agent. So yeah, we've got, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, 40-ish women's footballers that I manage, and so we're looking obviously for their playing contracts around the world. I've fortunately been able to do contracts in every federation now across the world. So got players globally. Heavily the States is still bread and butter. The NWSL, big fan. And then yeah, so we handle obviously like I said, their playing contracts, the bonus packages, and an entire compensation package, the sponsorships and endorsements. We do bit of PR management. Fortunately, they're all awesome, so it's never bad PR. But yeah, helping them with understand what to say in a press conference and how to utilize the opportunity when it might get in front of you. So yeah, it's a long way of saying quite a few things.
And what about, if anything, do you miss about this college sports space, right? Because I think before I dive deeper into that, what you mentioned from a PR standpoint, I mean, even explicitly saying what, helping them understand who they are as people and commercial entities, those aren't necessarily things that athlete development folks could be saying publicly and allowed within those four walls. And so
Yeah.
like, what if anything do you miss? But then also, what have you learned as prepared you to be a better agent, if you will, at Halo?
Yeah. I think going from a college to an agency, a big difference is being part of that team that wins and loses on the weekend. From a college aspect, I definitely miss being a part of something where we all wear the same thing every day. We've all got the same I mean, we do all have the same Halo logo, but we represent so many athletes that on a weekend we're probably representing half of both teams. And so whoever wins or loses, we support our clients. And so it's a lot more individual faced, which I'm fine with, don't get me wrong. But like I said, there's something special about being on the sideline of a ASU football match and having tens of thousands in the stand just going bonkers as the fireworks go up, as the guys come out the tunnel. Like, that's special. You don't replicate that. So I definitely miss that. I miss college environments. I love college towns. I think it's so fun, the concept of every person there just wanting to better themselves. And there's obviously great bars as well. And so I do miss college atmosphere. Don't get me wrong. I don't think you can find any alumni of any university that doesn't say, "Oh, I miss those days." It's
Yeah, exactly.
we all do. And
Yes.
so yeah, I suppose that's probably my big one, is that level of camaraderie and atmosphere. Certainly miss that.
So as you're thinking about sport in particular right now, in a global sense, right? The NCAA, I think the NCAA, whatever, gets a lot of well-earned and deserved flack in regards to where we are. I say
You're
we as a,
picking your words terrifically, by the way. You're doing a good job.
I used to work there, so I'm also being mindful. But a lot of flack in regards to where we are and where we aren't. But I want to particularly think about your role at Halo for a second, and thinking about college in the sense of curriculum. Because you were talking about before, right? You're currently serving the board of the sports law and business program in Arizona State. And I was just talking to someone who was at South Dakota or North Dakota State, and she
Yep.
was saying her research is focused on internationalizing sport management curriculum to better prepare graduates and really alum to be able to be, I don't know, effective and prepared to work in this global emerging and evolving global workforce. Outside of being, just not from the United States, how were you able to continue to, stay, up to date in regards to what's happening globally? You mentioned you're learning Italian, but like, how are you staying, abreast in regards to what's happening literally in a global environment, given that most people work in either a state, like a conference, even though maybe coast to coast, region, right? Like, how are you staying abreast?
Uh, coffee is my answer. Yeah, I don't sleep a whole lot. So it is really interesting though, because I think post-pandemic, we're in a very unique world where the time zones are becoming just about the only hindrance, right? You don't need to fly to a different continent to meet with someone to negotiate something. We're having a great conversation. Wi-Fi connection's going great, knock on all of the wood. We can do this from different ends of the world. Zoom wasn't utilized. We had Skype, but Zoom wasn't utilized pre-2020, which is previously. So to speak on curriculum, something that we're working on at the Sports Law and Business program is developing more meaningful curriculum around international business and understanding that it's very easy for us to do business now in Japan or Italy or Australia or America at the drop of a hat. I've got one player's heading up to the UK, just off the top of my head, next week, in a couple of weeks. And she hasn't been there before, but she's been able to meet the entire staff and have meaningful conversations and get a full presentation as if she had been there the only thing she hasn't done is physically touch the jersey. It feels like she's met everything else. And so I had to, at the start, obviously had to negotiate the contract, had to do that if in theory I didn't, and English is probably a bad example because it's culturally pretty similar, but I've done the same at Portugal is probably a good example. That was quite interesting, and learning how the Portuguese negotiate and do business and what their systems and processes are, how they speak to each other. That's all things that I had to learn off the top, because when I was in school in the States was pre-2020 and we didn't have, I know you can study international business and I'm sure they go over that, but in a sports management space, we weren't getting coaching on that because our focuses were hockey, football, baseball, basketball, which was very American centric. And so, which is fine. I'm not knocking anything. I'm just saying as development of society and where we're going, we are in a position now where international business is going to speed up fast, because we're able to have these conversations and we don't need to get on a plane or drop tens of thousands of dollars on travel to go to a different country to actually speak to someone face to face. Face to face will always trump this. Don't get me wrong. I would love to be having a beer with you right now, but the nature of business is if I need to get something done, let's get on a phone call. I'll get up at 4 a.m. if it's with Germany or something. It's fine. That's my only hindrance is time zones.
So a couple of things. So one, you have a 24-hour, like a better words, calendar, which is kind of wild. But then two, from a cultural immunity standpoint, what is it like for you to go to whether a European country or even an African country, South American country, and say, I'm Tay Hawker, right? I'm a New Zealander coming to do work on behalf of an American athlete, or even, you know what I mean? Like, what does that conversation look like to be able to build relationships, right? Friendships with people in other countries, to be able to do business in a way that makes sense for both parties?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway I've found is that we're really not that different. All these different cultures and societies, we're all
It's
very
good.
much humans. And
It's
so
good. It's good
that
stuff.
interaction is the same. I found that when I moved to the States as well, as the Americans and the Kiwis are pretty much the same. We all want the same. We all want to be happy. We all want to get a good deal. We want our client to get paid as much money as they can get paid, and they go to the best place with the best housing and the best transport and the best team that's going to make them the best footballer they can. The team wants a great footballer at a reasonable price that is a good person and deals with me, that they want to call. We all just want to get along at the end of the day. It's not that complicated. So I think that going to those different countries and different towns and working with different people just becomes very similar at the end of the day. And I think as long as you're a good person and you treat everyone with respect, doesn't matter what corner of the world you're in, we're all the same. And so that's my big philosophical takeaway.
What's been one of the you said reverse culture shock, but working with other countries, what's been one of those moments you're like, oh shit, either I fucked up, or oh shit, I didn't know that, or oh shit, I didn't even think to ask that. You know what I mean? Like, what's been one of those moments you could think about, at least in real time right now? It's
Yeah.
like, damn, like I definitely have one. I'll share it to you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, there's a few. Some I'll say when we recording, because I'm
Yeah,
assuming the people on the
yeah.
other end are probably on the line, will be able to watch it. But I was actually just talking to my partner about this. One of the big takeaways that I thought was interesting was when you're speaking, negotiating with people where English isn't their first language. I originally, and this might make me sound ignorant, which I apologize, but I didn't stop to think about the fact that it was a second language. And so
Mm,
a lot of the time, and I actually started learning this when I started learning Italian, because I'm a very base level of Italian right now. But if I had to negotiate with someone, I could probably come across quite brash because I
mm,
don't know certain word fillers and creating a narrative that's
it's good.
relaxed. Or I can do that in English, but I was, yeah, negotiate. I'll leave a name out, the country out of it, but it was European,
Hmm.
and they didn't speak English. But I was getting these WhatsApp messages and everything that were very short and blunt, and I would wake up at like 2 a.m. that getting mad at my phone because why are they being so rude about this? Like I asked a simple question, and they were coming back with like a few words, and I was getting real wound up. And but now that I'm learning Italian myself, I'm going, oh my, wouldn't even know what, it's certain things like knowing where to put ha-has in a text, or like if something's a joke, and, and those sorts of things that I just didn't know. And so I would find myself at all hours of the night stressed and angry, and being like, why are they being so rude about this? Or like, really, one word, like they would just respond with okay, and I'm like, is that all you've got? But it's probably
Mm,
because they don't know too many of the other words or know when to
words.
use them. And so I'm getting better at the international negotiation. But that's one of those examples that I was getting so wound up, and now I'm able to look back and be like, good on them for doing it, because I would be so stressed if I had to negotiate in Italian right now. I'm getting better, but um, yeah, it's just one of those things that you've got to keep an open mind and understand that my level of English is not everyone's level of English.
That's actually a really good example. The one
What
I'm
was your
thinking of,
example?
the one I'm thinking about, my guy Ryan, he's working in Australia actually now. He was graduating, went to Nike Academy in the UK. Very smart, sharp dude. He was graduating in December. He's like looking for jobs and whatnot. And I'm like, again, I'm going through the whole process, right? The whole F1 thing. He wants to go back. He wanted to go back home. He did. Um, but we're getting to December, and I'm like, he was stressed the fuck out. I'm like, bro, like, if things don't work, we could find something for spring semester back home. Da da da. He's like, no, no, no. Like that's when we're off. And I'm like, what do you mean? And so I wasn't even calculating the fact like northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, the employment timelines were different.
Yeah,
So when he was going back home, I was like, oh, like I should have been doing way more work on the front end 6 months ago, not even
yeah,
thinking about. And so that was like, okay, Tim, like you need to be more mindful, not just whether it be language or cultural difference, but also like, I don't know, geographic location
yeah.
in the equator, because it definitely, can dictate one's employment entry into the workforce back into their home country.
I Mate, I had one of the culture shocks that I had was, we've got a very this is a compliment to New Zealand. We've got a very healthy work environment, and what I mean by that is we have a lot of time off,
Mm,
structured. We get our work done. Don't get me wrong, but it's like a lot of like mental health days, and then over Christmas we were off for like 3 weeks. And when I say off, like off. And for 10 years of working in the States and then coming back to that,
dang.
it was so anxiety inducing to not like look at my emails and like have no emails coming in. Like I know that you get like a few days off for Christmas in the States. I'm talking about like people vanish to lakes and beaches, and it's like holiday, and it's unanimous around the country. Like there's stores that weren't open and stuff, and that was a shock to me, because I was, when I was here as a teenager, you don't really notice those sorts of things from a commercial work, a commerce lens. And now
True.
that I'm back, and like I'd be checking my emails every day, thinking that like something's not, like I'm missing something. Like why am I not getting emails? It was simply just people weren't working. And
Dang.
I like, in retrospect, it's really cool. And coming up into this year, I'm able to like make plans for that. But the last
Yeah.
year I had no plans because I was like, I didn't ask, but I assumed, oh yeah, we'll get Christmas the day after Christmas, maybe in
Like,
New Year's Day, we'll get a couple of days off there. And so I didn't make any holiday plans. I didn't plan to go do anything. So I was just kind of like hanging out. And fortunately, my partner came out to visit, and so we were able to do stuff. But we
yeah.
were scrambling to think of ideas because she was like, "Oh, we should go do this," and we would go, and then it'd be closed, and I'd be like, "I don't know. I'm sorry, babe. I didn't know any of this." So there was a culture shock. We're dangerously laid back around here.
I had to come visit, bro. It's definitely on my list of places to see. So you'll see me soon. But
Yeah.
before we get to segment 3, bro, I got to ask this question, right? There are a number of different agencies around the world. Again, a lot of different, talent agents that are popping up in the US, but globally as well. Two-part question, right? What makes Halo sport different? And what makes Tay Hawker different?
Yeah, the Halo one's easy. We are the coolest people that you could possibly work with. But no, actually, I think what I've really enjoyed is the people at Halo are so down to earth and caring and fun to be around. The type of agents that I think there's this narrative around sports agents, and hopefully this will tie back to me as well. Hopefully, I don't love tooting my own horn, but there's a narrative around sports agents as being these like slimy, slippery wheelers and dealers that are just trying to nickel and dime people, right? And that happens. There's like through every stereotype, there's a basis of truth, certainly. But what I really like about Halo is we aren't in three-piece suits every day to go into the office. Our managing director wears a snapback occasionally. Like it's laid back in the sense of we definitely are an agency that if you're not doing anything on a Wednesday and you want to come grab a coffee or a beer, come and swing by the agency. It's cool like that. While at the same time having negotiating the biggest deals in world rugby, growing in many different other sports as well. Our a few of our head honchos as some of the most intelligent, hardworking, creative sports agents I've ever seen or come across anywhere in the world, and America included, which is the big market for sports agency. So I think what makes us different is that we're relatable. We, like I said, down to earth enough that you can have a pretty candid conversation with us. We're not untouchable people that don't understand your struggles as well. We are there with you, while having the firepower of being an international network and everything too. So I think it's a cool little crossover. You won't see us in 6-car Escalade convoys pulling up to a nightclub, but we'll certainly come along for a drink with you, put it that way. And so I really like that. I think from my perspective, I'm in a really unique position, and it could be a bigger conversation, but being a straight white male in the women's sports space is quite unique. I know a lot of coaches are similar to me, but as an agent, it is quite different because I'm working with my clients are people that I don't look like or go through the same struggles as or anything like that. And so I have to find my place as an agent there. I would pray and hope that the girls look at me as like an older brother, someone that they can lean on, and be there for hopefully good advice. But I think what I hope to be is reliable. I think that's probably the key for me as an agent, is someone that will show up when they need that support, whether that be getting a contract, which is obviously the big part of the job, or if it's struggling because coach isn't playing them or their roommates being mean or everything in between. I want them to know that I'm here for that and I'm going to answer all of their calls. And so reliable would be the key one there. And I think that encompasses you rely on me to get you the best deals you can, and rely on me to be that support when you need it. So that's what I hope my clients would say about me.
It's fucking dope, bro. I love it. I love both of those answers because you're true. I appreciate it. I definitely got my own words. I'm a flowers to give you in about 5 minutes. But segment 3, right? How can I, but also our podcast community, best support you? So one thing I mentioned before on social, right? Something I'm proud of is that we have an audience that represents over 39 countries now, which was a shock to me when I first looked, but I think it's representative of where we're going and who we are. So you're talking to literally the world, right? You're already doing it, speaking Italian and shit now, but like, how can I best support you? How can our podcast community best support you, regardless of where they're geographically located at this current moment?
Yeah, I'm probably going to take the opportunity to plug women's sport in general. I think everyone listening can support me, but also the industry by, first of all, either giving it a chance, go invest a little bit, tickets, whatever, buy some beers at the game, go to a women's sport event and have a really open mind. If you go into it with preconceived notions, very few things in life ever hits your preconceived notions. So give it a chance. If you're already on the bandwagon, you're already a fan, encourage someone to join you in a very non-confronting way. And if they don't, let them be. It's not a big deal. Just open arms, I would say, give people the opportunity to come and get on board. We've seen in the World Cup, tens of thousands of people are showing up. Millions have bought tickets to these games. And so it's not like we're scraping for fans, but I think in the scheme of growing the commercial lens of women's sport is just understand that if you're going to a game to see someone sprint as fast as a NFL player, you might not see it, and that's okay. But if you're going to see a high level of aggression, a high level of competitiveness, an increasing level of talent, or technique and technical talent, I should say, have an open mind. It's a great time. The people there are good vibes. Beer's cheap. Everyone loves cheap beer. So it's one of those things that I suppose if you want to help me, give women's sports a go.
I love that answer. And one thing we didn't talk about, we don't have to dive into it too deep right now. I might bring you another once again before we jump off season 5. But you mentioned, right, U.S. women's soccer team losing, unfortunately, sad tears, big sad tears. And I was one of those people that got up at 4 o'clock and watched it. Fun time.
Yeah.
But as we think about women's sports, right, you mentioned like the record-breaking numbers, right, in Australia, and New Zealand right now. Hopefully, prayerfully, we get the Women's World Cup in 2027, sharing it with Mexico. And then, of course, LA 28, right? I think where U.S. sports leagues and sport culture is right now, I think 27 and 28, I'd love to hear your thoughts, could be the 2 years that really explode women's sports to where it should have been and needs to be moving forward.
Yeah, I think, again, I'll preface this by saying I claim America as my second home. I was wearing a US soccer jersey for every game. And so I was gutted when we lost that game. I was really gutted, but immediately excited. And what I mean by that is there's nothing more dangerous than a cornered animal. That's the most true statement in the world. And right now, the US women's national team is cornered, and I think that means they're dangerous, frankly. I think that there's a huge opportunity now to go away with a refresh, a rebrand, an increased emphasis on high performance. I think it's a huge compliment to women's soccer globally that the rest of the world has caught up and now playing at a very high level as well. And I think, as I said to you on the podcast before, America hates losing. And so I believe that they're going to go back to the drawing board, pump cash into it. And with cash comes that level of high performance, high standards, and those all, breed success. And so I think if we are able to secure the World Cup with Mexico and with the Olympics on home soil as well, there's a real opportunity to get some of those people who are either on the fence or naysayers to come along for a game, because why not? And you get them in the door, go along with a mate. It's one of those things that I remember when I was in college. Me and the rugby team used to go to a ton of sports that you would never have caught me dead going to. I won't name them because I'm probably friends with half of them that played in college. But we would show up to all these random sports, get a few drinks in us, have a good time, maybe a few too many drinks, and we get rowdy. You sing some songs and everything. You walk away going, "That was awesome." And now I'm a fan of a lot of those sports, and I still track along to see how they do it and everything. So sometimes it's just giving it a go with an open mind, have a positive attitude, and so I think doing that on home soil with, like I said, America, I don't see them being bad for, not that they're bad, but I don't see them not being a top competitor for
Sure.
long at all. I think the Olympics next year is a huge opportunity for them to turn around. I think the side's going to look different. There's some incredible young talent coming through
Mm-hmm.
the US system. And so, refresh side, refresh brand. I only see good things coming in the future for the national team. It's got to go through growing pains, just like anything.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be an increasing amount of parity, particularly in
Yeah,
women's soccer moving
which
forward.
is
I'm excited.
wicked, man. And I don't think enough people talk about that. You don't want dominance,
No, no, no,
and
no.
and it feels good at the time, but it doesn't grow anything. And I think now, you look at all these other countries being able to put their hands up. Now Jamaica's against the wall, right? Their federation has to stand up now and do something, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got Jamaican fans that are coming out of the woodwork now because they want to see their team doing well. South
Mm-hmm.
Africa had a great showing as well. There's other countries that are putting their hand up and saying, "Hey, we've got great soccer players as well." New Zealand beat Norway, tied with Switzerland, and those sorts of moral victories as well is massive for the country. So I'm really bullish on Australia. I think the Matildas have a great team. They're playing very well together with the Ellie Carpenters and Sam Kerrs of the world, and Sam hopefully is able to play a bit more. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great for the A League. I think it's just the nature of the fans get to go see their teams actually compete now and not just get slapped around by America. And so I think that's a huge opportunity for the growth of the game.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're definitely gonna see.
Yeah,
It's gonna be an interesting next 5 years, particularly within the States, but I think global sport as well.
yeah,
But tell you, man, like I said, I think we know each other, what, 4 years now, 4 or 5 years,
yeah.
I think, at this point.
Time
One thing you
flies.
said earlier in the conversation was about tall puppy syndrome. And that's something you do not have whatsoever, bro. You're definitely someone, you don't like, uh, what is the word? Talking about yourself, so I'll do it for you. Bragging about yourself, so I'll do it for you. But someone's always kept it 100, right? I think the level of care you show to both not just athletes, but also colleagues, including myself, has been tremendous and unwavering. So again, I want to first thank you for you showing up to this podcast and contributing your thoughts. But two, to say thank you for the friendship, bro. Like I said, even thousands of tens of thousands, however fucking way we are from each other, we're still connected, bro. So I'm glad to be a friend, and hopefully an honorary Kiwi. But don't claim me until I visit first.
Yeah, well, then no, I like that. I'm going to make you actually come visit before we give
Yeah.
you the title. But you've pretty much secured, and thank you as well. I think both obviously as a friend, but what you're doing with these sorts of podcasts and um, helping drive support for not just those without a voice, but man, the work that you put in for international student athletes meant more than any of us F1 holders could ever
Mhm.
be able to express, because we are still, I'm obviously not there, but we are in a position as F1 visa holders have been, with the huge lack of power and ability to do a lot of things in the States. And you, as someone that you didn't feel our pain, you weren't able to be in the same shoes as us, but you continued to speak up and support, and that meant the world, for people who, we couldn't get Americans on our side because they obviously couldn't feel the same struggles, but you
Mhm.
spoke up every time, and that means a hell of a lot. So thank you, and don't stop, keep going.
I receive it, man. I appreciate it, my friend. I'll find a way to get down there. I'll talk to you offline about something I'm thinking about. But again,
Yeah,
thank
no,
you for
for sure.
being the first guest, season 5, Walk with TFB, bro. Love you. I'm proud of you. You don't stop either, man. Keep going.
Appreciate you, Doug.
For everyone else, man, thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of Walk with TFB. Man, again, this conversation with Tay. It was all over the place, but I think it's all over the place for a reason, because where we have touched and where we continue to touch and make impact is not just an isolated lane. But I think one is going to continue to shape the future of not just international education, not just college athletics, but also global sport as well. Now, I look forward to seeing y'all next week on episode 2 as we continue to talk about international education, global sport, and Black culture. But as always, until then, walk with me.